another talk. We're blessed today to be joined by a guest speaker. We've got Dr Anastasia Hronis, who's a clinical psychologist and an expert in many things, which she'll talk to us about tonight. And of course, we're joined by Dr Athanasios, as usual. So we're blessed to have a beautiful turnout. Thanks for joining us tonight, and hopefully we'll all grow spiritually and learn a lot about. The talk is obviously titled Technology, Social Media and the Brain. So I'll pass over to Anastasia to give a bit of an introduction on yourself and the topic.
We're on. Lovely to be here with you all this evening. Lots of faces, lots of people in the room. This is fantastic. I'm Anastasia. I'm a clinical psychologist. I literally work across the road, so it was a pleasant evening Thai dinner for me, and then stroll across the road when it was time to come here. But I'm a practicing clinical psychologist, so I have a clinic where I see clients for therapy for a range of different things. And then I'm also a lecturer and researcher at the University of Technology, Sydney. So I teach in our clinical psychology program there, and my main area of work in the field, and both in research and in clinical practice, is in addictions, specifically behavioural addictions. So that counts things like gambling, pornography, video games, online shopping, social media, even people becoming addicted to swiping on dating apps these days. There's a lot of different things that a behavioural addiction can actually constitute. So that's kind of the main area and field that I work in today. So I guess that's why I'm talking on this topic of technology, social media, and the brain. I like to look at how technology actually impacts the brain, what actually happens from a kind of neurochemical perspective that makes us get hooked on certain things, like social media, but other platforms as well. Do you want me to keep talking or ask questions? Or
Well, off the bat, does anyone have any questions straight away that they want to throw at Anastasia, or we'll get started and I'm sure there'll be heaps that pop up.
From what age group do you take on clients? Is it young teenagers or younger than that? What is the age limit to come and see someone like you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So generally to see a psychologist, so we would see anyone across the spectrum. If we're working with really young kids, so up to about the age of 6, we're typically working more with the parents than we are the child directly themselves. From about sort of 6 to 10, depending on their sort of verbal and cognitive ability, we'll work a little bit more with them and less with the parents, but we'll see people all the way up to kind of later adult life. From the lens of kind of technology and addiction, I will see kids as young as they get addicted to screens. And unfortunately, the way that social media and these types of platforms are designed, they are designed to be addictive. And what we know about the kind of developing brain is that it's not yet developed to be able to sort of regulate itself to manage the addictive elements of these platforms. So if we think about the prefrontal cortex in the brain, I don't know if anyone here is studying like neuroscience or psychology at uni, but prefrontal cortex is front of the brain. It's this front bit. It's kind of what distinguishes us from some basic sort of animals. We have a very developed prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that helps us make decisions, it helps us problem solve, it helps us regulate ourselves. That isn't developed fully until we're about 25 years of age. So hands up here if you're under 25. You've still got a bit to go. Yeah. The brain is scientifically not fully there yet. It's still developing. But what we do know is that other parts of the brain at this age are very well developed. The parts that are very emotional, and the parts that are very reward driven. Okay, so this is why we might find kind of youth might be more likely to be somewhat more impulsive or risky in their decision making, because they've got a very well developed what we call limbic system, but the front of the brain that helps them regulate it is still got a little bit of work to go.
That explains
Yes. And unfortunately, things like social media, things like video games, things like dating apps, all these kind of platforms are designed to be addictive. They activate dopamine pathways in the brain. So dopamine is the chemical, the neurotransmitter in the brain that is responsible for us feeling hooked on things. So dopamine is activated when we experience something pleasurable, but it's also activated in the pursuit of achieving that pleasurable outcome. So for example, when you're scrolling through social media and you see a funny video that you like or something that's amusing or entertaining, dopamine will be activated in the brain. But also, when my phone is sitting here upside down on the table and I can see it, dopamine will be firing in my brain, motivating me to, and I'm sure you've all had this experience, without conscious awareness, pick it up, open it, click Instagram, and before I know it, I'm scrolling, and I don't even remember actually making that decision for myself. That very subconscious process is dopamine being activated, driving us to pick up the phone without even realizing that we're picking up the phone. To come back to your question about, I'm just talking now, so feel free to jump in with questions, but to come back to your question about age, I work with pre-teens and early teenagers who are hooked on, I don't know if anyone has come across what we call social casinos or simulated gambling. So there are apps that you can play that are like poker machines, like roulette, like casino games. They're not technically gambling because you don't actually have to put any of your own money to play. They give you in-game money. But they function exactly the same as other gambling platforms do. And what we know is that this psychologically prepares young people to gamble once they hit the age of 18. And the reason we know it's effective is because the people who own the simulated gambling apps, unsurprisingly, also own the real gambling platforms. So it's a well-established pathway that one leads to the other. So I've had 12-year-olds in my room addicted to playing these simulated gambling games. And a lot of them are, in their design, quite targeted towards young kids. They've got like furry animals and pets and stuff that you can pick that make it very appealing to young children. Other questions? Yeah.
How would you, so I'm a teacher, so I teach year 4, so the kids are about age 10 years old. How do you, I guess, kind of overcome those addictions for children at such a young age? I've got a student in my class and her mother said that her daughter had an addiction to the iPad. She took the iPad away and the daughter said that she felt lonely. So how do you, I guess, help children overcome that?
That's such a good question. It's a good example because you actually can get withdrawals from devices. Sometimes people think you can only get withdrawals if you stop drinking or taking drugs or using a substance. You can actually get it from stopping, social media and screens and technology, and that's because our brain enters what we call a dopamine deficit state, where it's almost like screaming for that input, for that stimulation that we get from screens. So how to help young children manage screen use and screen time? It's really about setting limits. Unfortunately, children won't be able to set those limits for themselves. They don't have the cognitive ability yet. And so we do need restrictions put in place. I guess that's why in some way the government has come in with this social media ban that comes into effect in a couple of weeks' time. But it really is about sort of putting those restrictions in place, whether it be on the kind of amount of screen time, or whether it be what platforms and apps children are actually using. So one thing to keep in mind is that the faster we can do something, the more addictive potential it has. So if you think about gambling, for example, playing a poker machine, there's actually limits as to how fast a poker machine can spin. It's 2.1 seconds, 2.14, I think, to be exact. Yeah. So poker machines are much more addictive because one of the reasons is we can play them faster than to scratch a scratchy. The same applies with things like social media. The faster and with the less friction that you can use something or scroll through something like TikTok or Instagram, the more addictive potential it has. The faster you can swipe through dating apps, all these kinds of things. I don't know if any of you in the room are old enough to remember this, but in the original days of Facebook, you used to scroll through your home feed and then you would get to a button and it said one of two things. It either said, click to see more, and so prefrontal cortex comes back online and we make a decision about whether we want to keep scrolling through and seeing whatever we're seeing, or it would say, you're all caught up. There's no more to see. You actually reach the end, which doesn't exist nowadays. We have the endless scroll. There's no such thing as being all caught up. But the reason these things don't exist anymore is because they would take people away from the platforms. They would serve as circuit breakers to make people step away. The companies have now removed these design features to keep people on there for as long as possible.
Just to add to Eleanor's question about how to impose these sorts of things to help young kids, does it also apply, do the same methods apply for youth? You know, and is it different as you go throughout the ages? Obviously, it's hard to, discipline yourself and say, I'm just going to stop at an hour. I know a lot of us probably set time limits for certain apps on our phone, but sometimes it's just as easy as ignore for the day, and then you're back on it.
Yes, yeah. I always encourage taking a two-pronged approach, and this applies to someone who might just feel like they're a bit too hooked on social media, or it might apply to someone who feels like they've got a more sort of significant or serious addiction. And that is that we always need two types of strategies. We need strategies to kind of reduce the behavior we want to do less of, so reduce the scrolling, reduce the screen time, reduce whatever it is we want to reduce. But doing that in and of itself is not going to be enough. I don't know if anyone has ever done a bit of a challenge for themselves where they go, right, a week or two of no social media, and then they feel the urge, they feel like they want to keep going back to it, they consider reinstalling it, and then maybe after the 2 weeks you go, okay, my 2 weeks is up, I'm downloading it again, and you just go back to doing exactly what you were doing beforehand. Yeah. What we also need to do to prevent that from happening is increase what we call values-aligned behaviours. So if we just put the restrictions in place, we end up with this situation where we're in a constant urge state. Like we've still got that dopamine driving us back to social media, back to these apps, but we need to fill that with something. And the most effective way to fill that time, that space, that energy, is to fill it with values-aligned behaviours. The research tells us that when people live their life according to what their value system tells them, that they are overall more content and more satisfied with the life that they live. This doesn't necessarily mean moment-to-moment happiness, but it's that bigger feeling of satisfaction and contentment and kind of peace in life. We may still have stress or the ups and downs, but if I feel like I'm living life according to my values, then that bigger picture feeling is one that sustains us through life. So it's got to be that two-pronged approach.
Any other questions for the time being? Unless we'll continue on with the talk. Yep.
Obviously, when you say value kind of life, would you just give an example?
Yeah. So what are values, or what do I mean when I talk about values, basically? So values are the things that we feel are most important to us kind of at our core. When we talk about values from the lens of psychology, we're essentially thinking about values as a compass. They guide us in particular directions in life. They're different to goals in the sense that we never fully tick them off, we never finish them, but rather they help us set goals that feel meaningful for us. So values could be things like the obvious ones of family, spirituality, faith, health, friends, etc. But there can also be things like creativity, adventure, compassion, empathy. It's whatever we feel are the things that are core to how we want to choose to live our life. One of the ways that we encourage people to reflect on what their values are is we say, imagine yourself as a 80, 90-year-old. Imagine yourself at that point in time in your life and think back on your life as to the person you would have liked to be through your life, the things you would have liked to have done, etc. And this kind of reflection, thinking back on our life, helps us get in touch with and identify what values are important to us. So really thinking about those values as then things that we can use to set meaningful goals for ourselves. We've probably heard a lot about like SMART goals and setting goals, but really it's about setting goals that are most meaningful to us.
I suppose just to add to that, I suppose the follow-up question I would have is that is the reason why we want to pursue value-based activities as replacements for these addictive things because they are more fulfilling in that sense? And so why is it important that we pursue things that are fulfilling rather than momentary dopamine hits?
Yes, it's absolutely that. I encourage people, once you go through a process of identifying your values, write out a list of what they are, and then write out a list of things you can specifically do that align with those values. So if I have the value of creativity, what's 5 things practically I can do day to day, week to week that fulfill that value? And when I decide to then take my break from social media or take my break from screens, whatever it might be, and I feel like I've got that empty time or that urge to want to go back to it, look at that list of values-aligned behaviors and pick some of those to fill the time with. And if, as you say, if we are doing that, we're going to have a life that feels richer, that feels fuller, that feels more satisfying to us, and that's going to then protect us against being pulled by those more dopamine-driven behaviors.
What's going to happen to these kids when the ban comes in and then they're all stranded with no social media, like they're all going to freak out? Like what's been put in place for them?
Yeah, I think that is an excellent question. What's going to happen to the kids, but also what's going to happen to the parents and the teachers? Because I think, unfortunately, what we're going to see, and I know this is a bit of a, not quite the same example, but you know when you have, like, as you see a young child kind of having a meltdown because they can't watch Bluey on TV or something like that, right? It's going to be a similar kind of thing because of how the brain works. The brain goes into a dopamine deficit state, and we're going to have a whole cohort of young people who are going to be in almost like a withdrawal state at the same time. So I feel for the teachers in the classrooms who might have to deal with that, and the parents at home, and the kids as well. I think it's going to be a kind of distressing experience for a lot of people all at once.
More crying children in the church as well.
More crying children. Yes.
Trying to get the iPads.
But I think unfortunately it does mean that young people will probably lose a sense of connection, a sense of creativity. I've heard a lot of young people talk about social media as being a platform for them to express themselves, connect with people. So I think connection and creativity may suffer in the short term, but I'm hopeful that we can, unfortunately I don't think it's been well planned, but I think we can probably find ways to cultivate that connection, that community, and that creativity in other ways in life.
I've got a question. What do you think is the most serious social media platform that is causing the most problems at this moment for that generation?
That's such an interesting question. I think, look, all of them in so many different ways. I think TikTok, I'll give you an example because I think it's to do with algorithms, yeah? Algorithms are so dangerous. I have a 12-year-old boy that comes to the clinic, and one of many that I'll say that this applies to, who has recently started vaping. 12. And, it wasn't the reason why he started coming to me, but it's one of the things that's come up through our work together. And he showed me his TikTok. And on his TikTok home page, I sound like an old person now, homepage, explore page, whatever you call it. On that page, it was full of colourful, bright, exciting vapes. Young people, vaping, exhibiting how fun it can be, flavours, all these kinds of things. It was advertising, right? And so I felt so outraged at this that after the session ended, I went onto my TikTok and I typed in vapes because I wanted to find like the kind of picture that he had on his homepage, and I wanted to take a screenshot of it so I could kind of show people and be like, look what TikTok's promoting. So I searched vapes, and all I got was videos talking about how vapes affect your lungs and how bad vapes are you, because TikTok knows that I'm a clinical psychologist who works in addictions. So it gives me the content that I want to see. But I'm like, in the same way that TikTok knows I'm a 30-something-year-old psychologist who is anti-vapes, it also knows that my client was a 12-year-old boy who's highly susceptible to marketing. So I think social media could look so different if it wasn't for the ways in which algorithms are constructed. We see not only algorithms feeding videos that we're going to find interesting or appealing, but rage bait, yeah? The videos that make you feel something, the videos that make you feel angry, the videos that spread misinformation, even if we know they're misinformation, that make us angry because we're more likely to engage with them. So I think TikTok is highly problematic. I don't know how many of you are on Twitter or X. That has changed significantly in the last few years. My partner told me, he used to be a real big Twitter person, but doesn't really use it anymore. But the day that Charlie Kirk was shot, my partner opened X, and the way he found out the news that Charlie Kirk was shot was because the first thing he saw was a video of it. And I mean, that's distressing for anyone to see. I never saw that. I saw the video, thankfully. But kids are exposed to this. So if we as adults have trouble regulating our phone use, regulating our social media use, how can we possibly expect children to understand the impact that it will have on them and expect them to be able to manage it? I think there's a lot of discussion at the moment about digital literacy. I think that's important. I just don't think it's enough. I think ultimately the change has to come from pushing against the companies that can create algorithms that are so inherently harmful.
Obviously we live in a digital world now where AI is quite a big thing. How does that kind of play a role in, I guess, not only young kids but like the youth, adults' life? And yeah, I don't know how to express it, but like, how does AI play a role in addiction and whatnot?
Yeah. AI, I'll say a couple of things about this. I think there's a lot of good that can come from AI, right? So I won't talk too much about that, but in terms of risks and problems, if we think about things like ChatGPT, I use Perplexity, there's one called Pi AI, I don't know if anyone's ever used that. They are becoming exceptionally good at being really validating. If you chat to, especially this one Pi AI, it's almost like a bit of a friend. If you chat to it, it's the nicest friend you'll ever have. It's a friend you can talk to at any time of the day or night. It's a person, and well, it's a platform, it's not a person, but it's AI. You can talk to it, you can tell it anything. You can repeat the same problem that you're having to it 500 times over, and it won't tell you like, oh, shut up, I'm sick of listening to this. You've got to solve this problem yourself, right? It will meet people's needs in ways that people actually can't, right? Because it's unnatural for us to kind of interact that way. So I think we are seeing the risk of people relying on AI for trying to get those emotional needs met. And as a result, we've seen all these stories in the news about people kind of falling in love with their AI, marrying their AI, all these kinds of wild things that have happened. Yes, and the flip side of that, young people taking their lives because AI has talked them through it, given them ideas, encouraged them to do it. There was a case a couple of months back, I think in the UK, of someone who was recovering from a drug addiction, and they spoke to AI about it, and AI's suggestion was, I think they were using meth, just use a little bit. So there's a lot of risks with AI. I also think when it comes to addictions, that AI has the potential to just amplify it, whether it be algorithms just knowing so well what keeps us hooked on platforms, even things like how AI is being and can be applied to pornography. And I think there's just so many risks there in terms of the potential of what we might see.
On AI, like, what's your thoughts on like Sora 2?
Say it again.
Like, what are your thoughts on Sora 2? It's like an AI platform used to like manipulate like athletes and stuff, saying like just certain sayings and stuff.
Is that like manipulating clips and stuff where they're, okay, so using AI to kind of change videos and make it out like they've said one thing when they've said another, yeah. I think the risk is like, we try to upskill people to be sort of savvy when it comes to like being able to discern what is factual and what is not, but these videos look so incredibly realistic these days that, I mean, I see many of them and I'm like, I can't discern if that's AI or not. And now, unfortunately, I see something and I almost have to view it with a lens of doubt because I'm not actually sure if it's true. And the problem is, we consume so much content. We consume crazy amounts of content because of how fast we can scroll and how much content is produced, that it wouldn't be sustainable for us to actually fact check every video that we saw. And so I think there's a real risk there for spread of misinformation.
Nicola?
You mentioned it briefly before, but from your experience, what's your take on pornography as an addiction in the minds of young men and men our age, in the way they see and treat women?
I can say a lot on this topic. So just repeat the question. Perspectives on kind of pornography as an addiction, but also kind of the perspectives that it might provide people with if they watch it. Yeah. People can absolutely develop an addiction to pornography. I've seen clients who will watch up to 9 hours a day of pornography. Yep. So it's a very real addiction. And if you think about how debilitating that is for people, it's very hard to work, have friends, have a job, have all the other things in life, if you're consuming that much per day. So unfortunately, I think pornography as an addiction is one that carries a lot of shame and stigma, and unfortunately a lot of people don't reach out for support around it. People are much more willing to come to the clinic and ask for help with alcohol, cigarettes, things like that. I commonly see it go hand in hand with video game addictions with young men. So whenever I see a young person who has a video game addiction, I'm always asking them about pornography use as well. And there's layers to how that can present. There's viewing pornography, but there's also then engagement with live chats, etc. So there's different levels to which someone can experience it. To answer the other part of your question, unfortunately, pornography portrays some very harmful messaging about healthy relationships, what consensual sexual relationships look like, and a lack of it. I'm getting into details here, guys. I talk about this stuff every day, so you might be squirming a little bit, but just it's important to talk about these topics. A vast number of videos online these days will show sexual strangulation. It's so much so that when researchers do interviews with young people, they do actually think about it as being quite commonplace and safe. There is no safe level of sexual strangulation. There's very well documented studies that show the impacts that it causes on the brain. So that's just one example of how harmful the messaging can be when there's so much of it about what sex or intimacy should or shouldn't look like.
Because I follow you on social media to see the discussion, because the discussions that you lead are amazing. And one of your latest posts was about a research paper that was done, which was very concerning, by, was it a reputable university or something, I don't know who they were, who said that pornography benefits young men. and I saw that you reacted very much against it.
I sent an email to the conversation asking them to take the article down and highlighted. Yeah, so there was an article that came out that I had a great issue with that spoke about the benefits of pornography. It was quite skewed reporting. It was based on a parliamentary inquiry that happened, but in the process of all that, there were comments made around, young people can, and when I say young, I'm talking like under 18 as well, right? Like young teenagers can critically engage with and evaluate the pornographic material that they see online. They can understand that maybe it's not entirely real or reflective of sex in real life, and this idea that teenagers can really critically engage with the material. I push back against that greatly, because the reality is that the brain is not yet developed when you're a teenager to be able to understand the risks and the dangers and the addictive potential of things like pornography, and to be able to see harmful messaging about sort of lack of consent and gender roles and things like this that's displayed and portrayed in pornography. It's not possible for children, based on neuroscientific evidence about how the brain develops, for them to be able to fully understand what they're consuming. So to go to the level of saying it's beneficial or something like that, I think is not right. And so I took great issue with it and posted about it online and then emailed. But they tweaked a few things in it, but they didn't take it down.
I'm very proud of you. That was a very brave stand, because in society today it's very easy to just go along with that narrative, which is like you're thinking, do they even think, these people, what they're writing? It's like,
It's an important topic, and it's obviously something that shouldn't be glossed over or shouldn't be unspoken. Eric,
I was just going to ask. We've talked about having a lot of sort of unnatural or even perverse sort of social norms that are being taught to young people. Do you think that for a generation that has had so much exposure, and especially kids that are younger than us, do you think there's a tipping point? Like, can we turn back from it, or is there like a massive social harm that's been done that's going to be hard to correct? And if so, how do we correct it?
How do we fix all the problems in society? I think a lot of this has come from a place of good, about like breaking down barriers and reducing stigma and having open conversations, and that is beneficial. And I think that can run some risks as well, where, as you say, maybe we do kind of tip things a little bit too far. I think communities, families, societies coming back to values is key. When I think about how society's changed over time, values have perhaps moved away from the core of how we function. I often think about sort of individualistic versus collectivist sort of values, and how we have progressively become more of an individualistic society. I'll give you an example. Boundaries. Yeah, boundaries. Everyone likes to talk about boundaries these days. What are your boundaries? Have boundaries, how to assert your boundaries. Yeah, I hear like a lot about boundaries. And I think we've gone too far with the topic of boundaries. Everyone has a boundary and they want to tell you what their boundary is. That's great. We also need flexibility with boundaries. We also need to be willing to go, you know what, yeah, I did have this boundary, but today's not the day I'm going to be able to uphold it. What we've lost is the kind of flexibility or the nuance in when we actually need to step back from that and take more of that collectivist lens. So I think what happens is we come at something with good intentions. It does the round on social media, perhaps. It gets a lot of kind of public attention, and then we take it a little bit of a step too far, and we do need to sort of bring it back. I don't know if that answers your question per se, but it's a big question.
This kind of builds up on that, but I've found myself having a conversation for a while now with people same age that we kind of talk about social media, and then we will say, you know, like, there's no way my kid's gonna have a phone till he's 18, and he's not gonna have social media. And I guess, my question is like, I also understand that there's harm in being extremely strict as parents, because then when the kids don't have the taste of something and then they do get the taste, and there's complications. So obviously, you know, there's many years, I don't know, only God knows when I'll have kids, but what is like your approach to parents kind of moving into parents and then discussing social media?
I think the best approach is when it's not sort of parents trying to do the work themselves, but they are collectively working with other parents and within community. If you say, my child can't have a phone until they're a certain age, and every other single child in that classroom has a phone, they're going to feel really excluded and left out, and it's going to be really hard to enforce that. But if 80% of the parents in that class say, yeah, we're going to agree not to give our children phones at least this year, maybe it's not with a defined age, but at least not this year, then they're not going to feel excluded because it is part of the norm. So what we need to work towards, and again, I think this is what government is trying to do with the sort of, they've come down with sort of very harsh blanket rules, right or wrong, I'm not sure, but we need kind of collective action against this, because otherwise it's going to be really hard for parents on their own to try and implement and enforce these boundaries.
Another question here.
How can we use social media to like improve our spirituality?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. How do we use social media to improve our spirituality? Father, do you have any perspectives on that?
Follow Chloe on Instagram.
Well, I was going to say.
That's the first thing.
That's
Follow
the
Chloe.
first thing, yes. Look, I think there are a lot of positive things, but I think the negative things do start to outweigh the positive things. I think we're all addicted, like, you know, clergy included. Like, sometimes you just keep scrolling and you know. Look, there are positive things. You can go on, you know, church apps. We've got the Orthodoxy app where you can listen to talks, you can listen to the daily Bible readings. You can find anything you want. But I think we need to use discernment. We need to use discernment. And another worrying thing that I find is that we shouldn't take away the human factor out of our lives. Like with AI and everything, it's so easy to get caught in all this, you know, get support for this, get support for that. And we get a lot of people that are addicted to AI. We get a lot of young people that, like, you know, we were talking about pornography before. Like, I find that this generation of young children are more exposed to it rather than what our generation was and our parents' generation was. And I find it very, it's a big problem. It's a big problem. Pornography is a big problem. I find that, I don't know how this under 16s ban will work. You know, my daughter goes to school, she's in year 11, already her younger friends are trying to find ways to go around it. Apparently some of them have already found ways to go around that ban, so I don't know how it's going to work. And as you said, I really like the collective aspect of it, where I think as parents we need to get together and say we need to support our children, because our children, this generation, is addicted to social media. Like, I look like you're in a bus, right? And you try to, like, my generation is like, when I'm in a bus, I bring a book. It's my time to open a book and read. And you're in a bus and you see everyone like this. They're on their phones. Or you go to a restaurant and, you know, you're eating your food and you look around and everyone's on their phones. Like, father's on the phone, the mother's on the phone, the children are on the phone, the grandparents are on the phone, and everyone's just not communicating. And many times, you know, we fall into that trap as well. Like, You know, I might go home after a long day and you know, as clergy, our phone, like even now during the talks, like it keeps buzzing, messages, everything. You know, we get to, like, we get bookings for weddings and baptisms, okay? And house visits, not just on text messages, on WhatsApp, on Messenger, on Instagram, on Facebook, on everything. We're just bombarded daily, and that's the adults, right? So I can only imagine the challenges that our younger generation, like our teens, face, where you know they're daily bombarded with all these messages, and especially for you know, like I find that the boys are bombarded with pornography, right? They're bombarded. The girls are bombarded with image, like videos about image. You need to look this certain way. If you don't look like that, if you're a bit, you know, if you're not as skinny as that model in that video, immediately they feel that pressure that if they don't look that certain way, they can't fit into society. And the other worrying thing that I find is online bullying. And I would like if you could give us some advice on that, because I'm a parent and I speak to many parents that have their children being bullied online by the school friends, by other people, especially with, what's the thing, it's Snapchat? Like, the things that you hear about Snapchat, it's like, come on, what's going on? No one controls that? There's no control, there's nothing there?
I think online bullying, unfortunately, becomes amplified when you add that layer of anonymity. You know, like, you know, we see online bullying sort of peer-to-peer, but also, you know, how many videos do you see of, I don't know, celebrities or people you don't even know? You go to the comment section and there's a whole bunch of really awful messages. People feel this sense of anonymity. You know, I'm just one person in amongst a whole bunch of comments. So what if I say something rude or say something mean? But yeah, online bullying, you know, it's so much harder to say something unkind to someone's face than it is to send it in a text or via a picture or put it out online. And the other issue is that with technology these days is that all that stuff has the potential to be spread so quickly. So, you know, a rumor is spread, a comment is made, a photo is shared, whatever it might be, before social media, that would have taken a much longer time to spread than how quickly and widely it can spread now as well. So the damage and the harmful impacts that we see are much more severe. The consequences are much more severe. We see a lot of young people experiencing sort of self-harm, suicidal ideation, and suicidal behaviours as a result of bullying because of how fast spread it becomes.
Because we can like bash on social media all day long. We know it's horrible, but it's not going to go anywhere. Like, to be a professional, you actually do need any kind of social media, especially as a psychologist. But going forward, how exactly should we properly approach it then?
Good question. What do we do? Okay, a couple of very practical tips. Who here wakes up and before they've got out of bed, picks up their phone and looks at some sort of social media? Okay. Who does it probably within the first half an hour of waking up? Okay. Okay, a lot of people. Not everyone. Okay. So, here's the thing about social media. You know how you scroll at the end of the day and it feels like, you know what, I've had a hard day, I'm just going to unwind, I'm going to scroll. It kind of feels restful, but it's actually very active for the brain because of the way dopamine works. You're getting this kind of yo-yo effect. Every time you sort of scroll through, there's anticipation, there's excitement, there's something funny, there's, you know, it's entertainment. Entertainment is designed to be entertaining. It's not restful for the brain. It is actually activating the brain quite constantly. So, one of the best suggestions I can have is avoid screens in the morning. Because what happens? You scroll through social media, dopamine's activated. You play a video game on your phone when you're on the train into uni or work, a bit of Candy Crush, whatever it is, dopamine is activated. You do a bit of scrolling for online shopping, dopamine's activated. Then when you go and you meet up with a friend or you do a hobby that you enjoy, because you've already had dopamine artificially activated early in the day, your brain doesn't want to be in a constant state of activation and stimulation. It's not natural for it, so it will down-regulate itself. What that means is that when you then go and do the other enjoyable stuff in life, like see friends, you may find it's not as enjoyable as if you hadn't have scrolled beforehand. The brain will only allow itself to be in so much of a state of kind of activation, and particularly dopamine activation. So avoid screens in the morning is a practical, I say simple depending on your relationship with the device, but a practical sort of tip. Anyone here ever put their phone on grayscale, black and white? Yeah. Instagram is much less entertaining when you're looking at it in black and white. There's a lot of studies that show people put their phone on grayscale and they naturally spend less time on their phone without even trying or without having the intention to, because it's just less stimulating, it's less exciting to the brain. You're much likely to put the phone down faster. You might pick it up the same number of times, but you'll be putting it down faster. So again, it's like another practical strategy to manage our relationship. Things like screen times, things like, there's an app called the Dumb Phone app where it sort of takes away a lot of the excitement and puts just like lists of all your apps that are on the home screen. These, unfortunately, we are in a day and age where we need to use other devices or other bits of technology to manage the technology we have. I think for some people, it can be a matter of just sort of deciding to use it less and then filling our life with other things like those values-aligned behaviours. But these apps are designed to addict to be addictive to the brain on a subconscious level. So I really believe in using like practical strategies to try and reduce our use of them.
Yep, another question.
With that constant exposure to dopamine, is there any research that shows the long-term side effects to what that can lead to cognitively?
The biggest long-term side effect is addiction. Dopamine is what drives addiction, whether it be sort of substances or whether it be behaviours. It drives addiction, and we find that the things that we would naturally kind of feel are enjoyable or pleasurable in life no longer feel that way, and we rely on, whether it be tech, whether it be drugs and alcohol, whatever it is, we start to rely on those things to feel good. And if we use those platforms enough, the brain will down-regulate itself where it doesn't actually naturally kind of produce the dopamine it needs, but we rely on devices and technology for that. So it definitely impacts our kind of overall mood and sense of enjoyment in life.
Can it, just to extend on that, can it lead to any like executive function problems, memory problems, anything like that, if it continues, if you're not intervening and doing anything about it?
Yeah. We are seeing a trend around, and there are longitudinal studies that show this, around attention span. So because the content that we consume is short form content, there has been a trend that's been identified where young kids and adults do now find it hard to focus on longer forms of content. So it's harder to read the book versus scroll through social media. What we also see is a reduction in what we call frustration tolerance. So this is my ability to sit with hard stuff. When I feel frustrated, when I feel annoyed, when I feel sad, when I feel whatever it is that doesn't feel good, we all need to build the skill of frustration tolerance and being able to sit there. I often use the example of when I was a little kid, I'm an only child, my parents would sometimes go to dinner with other parents, and I'd sit at the dinner table, and I didn't have a phone when I was little or an iPad, and so I'd like get the salt and the pepper, and I'd like pour it in my glass of lemonade, and then I'd like cut the up, and then like, put my fork through it. I just do all these like silly random little things at the dinner table to occupy myself while the parents were chatting. This was because I was bored, and I needed to find a way to entertain myself. So, but this is frustration tolerance. The problem with devices and screens for both kids and adults these days is that we don't really experience that same feeling because we've always got something to distract us. If I don't feel good, if I feel frustrated, if I'm annoyed, pick up my phone and suddenly I'm in another world and I'm getting that dopamine being activated. But the problem is, life comes with pain, with hardships, with frustration. We can't entirely avoid that. So it's a very crucial skill that we need to develop that young kids are not developing as much these days. So when I work with families and parents, one of the things I prescribe, I'm not a prescribing doctor, but I prescribe time to be bored. Give your kid 15, however long is age appropriate, time every day to sit doing nothing. Allow them to be bored and allow them to find ways to fill that time for themselves.
Another one here.
Would you also say, kind of getting to that board a bit, that with that short attention span kind of thing, it will also affect present and future businesses and things, because people would go into business and be like, I want it now. You know, no one's really willing to wait, even though like you would tell them like it'll be a while, it goes over that little bit, and then you feel like people now today are more aggressive or agitated in that sense, and do you believe that will also just get worse as we kind of have that same trend?
Yeah, we want things quicker and we feel frustrated when we don't get things quickly. If we think about dopamine from an evolutionary perspective, dopamine exists to help us do hard things. Because back in the days of the cavemen, we had to hunt for food, we had to build shelters, we had to rub sticks together and light fires. To survive was hard. And so dopamine was this motivator for us to do the hard things, and then it would be activated once we did it. Like, hooray, you found the berries and the food, and that's good, keep doing it. The problem is that today I don't need to, hunt down food. I can order Uber Eats. I don't have to put in any effort, it gets delivered right to my door. We can survive much easier, and we can get dopamine activated much faster. One of the healthiest ways we can get dopamine activated is through achievement. But when I say achievement, I don't mean getting a gold star, I mean putting your mind to something and seeing it through and achieving it. Anything that we have to work harder for is a healthier way to feel good, to get dopamine activated. Same goes for exercise. We have to put in the hard work and we get the good feelings at the end. It's a healthier way to get that activated versus through the instant gratification that comes with technology.
I know it sounds obvious, but when we talk about things that we can do practically speaking, and we touch on things how we can, not go for those instant gratification and those dopamine hits, things like, that come to mind obviously for us, when we want to improve our faith and improve our knowledge of the faith, spiritual books, reading spiritual books, watching spiritual content, these are the things that, fix our attention span. Speaking from experience, and I'm sure a lot of us can relate, on the way to work or on the way to uni and things like that, instead of scrolling on TikTok or scrolling on Reels, just doom scrolling, reading about the life of the saint, reading the daily gospel readings, watching something that's spiritually, enriching. We had a question over here about how can we, use social media beneficially, right? And so, again, it sounds obvious, but tailor your algorithm to, see things that we should be seeing, not things that we shouldn't be seeing. And there are ways that we can do that. We can see less and see more of certain things. There's a post in your Explore page or For You page. You can choose to ignore it. You can choose to see less. And so these are just practical ways that we should be implementing in order to cleanse our feeds, to spend less time on these things, and to fix our attention spans.
So, what are the effects of social media on sleeping patterns? Like, what do you see as a clinical psychologist?
Yeah, well, there's two things here. One is the kind of addictive element to it, and I hear a lot of parents say I can't get them off screens to go to bed because they're just stuck playing games, stuck on social media. So actually, that pulling ourselves away from it can be really hard. But the other element is the light, blue light, artificial light. Has anyone has anyone been far out to the country, like rural areas of Australia, and seen stars? Seen the stars?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to see so many yeses. It's magnificent. When you can see stars, it's incredible. We have a lot of artificial lighting in cities, and that actually really can disrupt our sleep. There are studies that show that it impacts our mental health and our psychological well-being, but also our sleep patterns. And so, you know, the screen before bed kind of gives your brain false signals about whether it's kind of sleep time or wake time, and it can actually, for some people, not everyone, but for some people, result in difficulties then falling asleep.
So how many hours would you recommend that we stop using social media before we go to sleep? Like, what's the recommended?
They say at least 1, ideally 2, but at least 1.
So no scrolling before bed.
Just kind of on that, there's like a bit of a pattern of like procrastinating your like self-care time through the end of the day, and like sometimes that self-care includes like putting on your phone and just doing your scrolling because you've been working all day or whatever. Then obviously that like impacts your sleep, and then the cycle continues. So like if you've been putting it off all day and then you get to the end of the day to do that, like how can you kind of get around that?
I'm all for an intentional scroll. I like a scroll. I've got social media. I was on Instagram the other night and I was scrolling and I was like, man, this algorithm's on its game. It's giving me exactly what I want to see right now. I was having a great time scrolling and showing all these great music videos and stuff. Anyway, I was sending them to people. I was like, oh gosh. But like, I'm all for a scroll. But I think there's something to be said about it being intentional. It might sound funny, but set time in the afternoon plan in the diary for scroll time. Yeah, it's intentional. It's not that automatic pull towards it. You get that kind of feel that it gives you. It's got an end time, and then your self-care can be things other than the scroll. It can be whatever it is that's going to feel kind of fulfilling or restorative. Often things that are quite sensory are a really good way to sort of help us restore. So I'm thinking from like a self-soothing perspective, things that smell nice or textures that are soothing. You know, anything that's really sensory is really restorative for us. Also, nature. There's something called attention restoration theory, and it talks about how nature is actually very restorative for the brain. When we feel like our attentional capacities are being depleted, it's probably about now with a talk this long, but when your attention starts to fade, looking at nature is actually highly restorative for the brain. And the reason is because of the word escapes me right now, fractals, that's the word, fractals. If anyone does like architecture or anything like that, you might know about fractals. So it's what we refer to as self-similarity. When you look at nature, when you look at kind of a scene of nature, you will see there are patterns where there is a lot of self-similarity. If you look at a vast field of grass, if you look at cliffs along kind of the shore, if you look at sand, if you look at trees, there's a lot of kind of pattern repetition. And visually, this is much easier for the brain to process than an environment like this where we have lots of different kind of shapes and they're sort of not necessarily shapes we'd see naturally in nature. So actually visual scenery is very restorative for the brain from an attentional perspective. I think I went on a tangent there. I can't remember what the question was, but yeah.
I'll attest to that. Like when I'm very stressed, I go to Maroubra Beach, go up there at the cliffs and just look at the waves.
Yeah.
Look at the waves. And I remember calling my brother once and he's like, what are you doing? Like, I'm just there looking at the waves. He goes, you're not going to jump, are you? I go, no, I'm not. I'm just relaxing.
And Father, are you scrolling on your phone
No,
when you're sitting?
no,
Okay. Are you
no.
listening to like podcasts?
No,
Exactly.
I'm just sitting there looking at the waves, and it's very repetitive. It's like that.
Yes.
It's very soothing.
Yeah.
Very soothing.
Being present with
Yes,
nature.
yes.
Yeah.
We have a question over here.
In terms of age generations between our generation and our grandparents' generation, let's say, parents, but nowadays even grandparents are not messed up, but still on their process with why has mental health awareness come more in our generation than there was in the 19th century and things like that.
So mental health awareness, why has mental health awareness grown, but maybe also rates of mental health conditions as well? I think over time we have become better at talking about mental health and reducing stigma. That said, I think there are differences there. We're maybe good about talking about some kinds of mental health conditions like anxiety, but if you've got schizophrenia, you might still feel a lot of stigma. Yeah. So stigma doesn't kind of apply equally across mental health conditions. But I think we have become better at talking about it. There's been more kind of public health initiatives around mental health as well, things like Are You OK Day, encouraging those open conversations. Big initiatives particularly towards men around men's mental health and talking about emotions and feelings and internal experiences. We are, however, seeing high rates of mental health conditions. Now, part of that will be because of increased awareness. Whenever we see increased awareness of something, we see higher rates of diagnosis. But there's a lot to be said for what else might be going on, and my personal perspective is the way that society functions these days is not always conducive to good mental health. We live very kind of separate, segregated, fragmented lives. I want to say there's a lot of kind of fragmentation in our lives these days, and I think that has a significant role to play when it comes to how good we feel our mental health is.
We've got two more. One here.
Just piggybacking off that last point, that idea of having these conversations, how would you personally navigate, say with a teenage client or patient of yours, being a high school teacher, I know they can be very stubborn or quick to dismiss you as just someone who's like out of touch or someone's boomer. This guy thinks he knows what's best for me. How would I go about actually talking about some of these fantastic points from tonight with, say, my students, for example?
I find when I work particularly with teenagers, I mean, I've got the added benefit of their coming to see me, so whether it's that mum or dad have told them to come and they have to come, there's already a foundation there laid, so it's not like random starting a conversation with them. But I think one of the most effective ways is questions. It's often less for me about what I'll tell someone. I don't do a lot of this kind of talking in any of my therapy sessions. It's not necessarily like, and did you know this about the brain, and your brain's not yet developed yet? It's actually a lot of kind of questions. So the word that always comes to mind is curiosity. For anyone in my life, if I can approach them from a lens of curiosity, of genuinely wanting to know more about them, know more about their experience, know more about their thoughts, their feelings, their internal world, if I can do that in a curious way, if I can ask questions, I think that serves as a great platform to then build from.
Piggybacking off the mental health aspect, the curiosity aspect as well, a lot of people these days do like a day in my life or what I eat in a day or something. Like, how can people sharing their life on social media create that, that anxiety to other people? Like, how does, I don't know if that makes sense.
Just explain it to me again.
So people do what a day in my life or what I ate today or something and they post it on social media like a vlog.
Yeah.
By people watching that, how can that negatively impact their mental health and stimulate that curiosity as well?
I suppose tagging on to that question as well from maybe a male sense as well, guys seeing other guys maybe on steroids or something, creating unrealistic goals for people's lives. How does that impact mental health?
But also spiritually as well,
yes.
All things. I think unfortunately it's the breeding ground for comparison and competition. There was actually rumors. I say rumors. One day I'm gonna get sued by like Instagram or TikTok. But there were rumors that Instagram actually did this thing where it would withhold likes. So if you put up a post on social media, obviously, we'd like some likes, right? If I put something up on social media, I will admit that I would like people to like it, yeah? That's a part of it. But what Instagram would apparently do is they would withhold showing you the likes. So if, 1 minute after, Maria posts, I go and like it, it doesn't necessarily show Maria, it withholds it. Now what that does is that creates that experience of Maria going like, oh, no one liked my post yet. And then I go back 2 minutes later and I check, and then I go back 5 minutes later and I check, and then suddenly, however long after, bang, you get a whole bunch. So it creates this anticipation, but also this kind of pull to value things like likes more. So I think when we see, content online, but also how it's been interacted with and engaged with, and if that post has a lot of likes or comments and things like that, it unfortunately is a breeding ground for comparison. And they say that social media is the highlights reel. There is this kind of movement towards people putting videos of themselves in not the perfect kind of ideal state. We see videos of people sort of crying on the camera and uploading that. I think that comes with a whole lot of problems as well. I think that falls into the risk of glamorizing things that are actually, that shouldn't be glamorized and romanticized. Like we've seen this trend of like romanticized sadness and romanticized kind of loneliness by the way it's being portrayed online. So I think we've got to be really mindful about the comparisons that we might naturally fall into when we're consuming this content.
Any other questions? Oh, we've got a couple. Yeah.
So you mentioned just then about what Instagram can do when they delay the likes and create that anticipation. So I wanted to ask, following on from that, how can we avoid that when we start to delay or avoid our attention being given to social media? How do we prevent ourselves from getting more when we're creating our environment?
Yeah. I think two things. One, becoming quite sort of literate around things like this, around how algorithms function, around how platforms function. You can find information online. Netflix does a similar thing with countdown timers. Netflix uses our data in so many different ways. They've run sort of studies and experiments without us knowing, where they will test how long that countdown timer should be to see how much people watch overall, and calculate the exact sort of millisecond it should be to keep people watching for as long as possible. So just becoming really quite aware as to what is happening online, how algorithms function, all of this. But the second part is setting the barriers and restrictions for us. If you post something online and you know that you've got a bit of a tendency to go back and keep checking if people have liked it, post it. Say, for the next hour, I'm not going to look at social media. Put the timer on your phone, put the phone in the other room, put it on flight mode, whatever you need to do. Set yourself that limit. Go away, cook some dinner, do something else, spend time with the family, and then come back to it. It's not about never coming back to it, but it's about sort of putting barriers in place so that we don't feel that constant pull to keep opening it and checking.
Yeah, maybe just last question.
Do you think that like if social media have like do you think that mental health that plays a friend? Do you think that you won't be as affected things online with algorithms that exist? Because like I'm doing like uni and I've done a lot of like create like apps and stuff. So I've recently done like apps to kind of help people online with mental health, like social media platform where younger people and older people can interact with, but like instead of comparing themselves, we can only have their self-interest rather than just algorithm based and like comparing. Because I think like you said, like the younger generation, they should still have a place to contact their friends and to have a social life, but in a different kind of way that could be healthy for adults and younger kids, So I don't know, algorithms I know have a big impact, but yeah, like without it,
The idea of social media at its core is great, a way to keep connected with people, a way to engage, not just face to face. I think that there's so much potential benefit with that, and that's, perhaps what social media was in its very original days, what it set out to be. So I think there's absolutely a space for having online connections, online platforms to connect, to share, to engage with other people, and even perhaps beyond people we know. I've met a lot of sort of, I call them friends. They're sort of colleagues, peers, people online that I've connected with that perhaps do work in similar spaces to me or have similar interests, and I love that about social media. But when we think about connection versus what we're actually doing when we're scrolling our feeds, we're not connecting with anything. We're connecting with what the algorithm is feeding us, and so it's rare that we see our friends' posts these days in feeds and things. So the algorithm drives things in very unhealthy ways that take us completely away from social connection. Social connection in its core, whether online is great, face to face is even better, but there's a real space for online connection. It's just that we've moved away from that.
Yep.
What are some exercises that you could probably implement into everyday life to boost that face-to-face connection with other people? Because I find, especially with my younger brother, struggles to kind of talk face-to-face even with my parents and engage in conversation. So what are some exercises that everyone can implement to advance that ability?
Yeah, I love this. We're activating oxytocin, a different kind of hormone and chemical in the brain and body. Physical touch, give hugs, handshake, pat on the back, pat on the shoulder. Yeah, physical touch actually activates oxytocin, which is the chemical that bonds us with other people. So whether it's a handshake, whether it's a hug, whatever it might be, connecting with people, smiling as you walk down the street and you see people, making eye contact, even if someone is not so comfortable doing it back, actually providing them with it will naturally activate oxytocin in their brain and body. So that's one thing.
Teenagers don't like hugs.
Nah. I don't like hugs. Maybe a pat on the back, something like that. Any kind of physical touch helps us build trust with one another. It helps us feel more likely to give to one another. But again, I come back to the question piece. Asking questions, get curious about people's experiences. When we ask people questions, we show that we care. We show that we want to be a part of their external and inner world. So I think when in doubt, go for questions.
Well, I think, it's a very beautiful topic, and it's something that we should all be diving into. And as we know, it's not easy. It's not easy to discuss these things, and a lot of these addictions and things that we have to fight. It's part of our spiritual fight. It's part of our spiritual battle that we're called to do. It's part of our cross to carry. And I think if we could just end, but there's one thing I just wanted to mention about St. Porphyrios, who's our patron saint here of Koi. He used to say that the youth that would come after him, which is us, because he reposed in 1991 or 2, was it? Around then, he said that the youth that would come after him would wage war against the demon of lust and fornication, would be considered greater than the martyrs. So to put that into context, it's a big thing, that we're doing. We're fighting against the demons here, and it's a big part of our spiritual struggle. In fact, it's probably one of the hardest parts of our spiritual struggle, is to realign our values and realign our priorities. And so hopefully we can take inspiration from everything that Anastasia said today, and the beautiful quote from St. Porphyrios. And not there, anything to add? Oh, just a couple of announcements as well. Next week we've actually, funnily enough, we've got a talk on St. Porphyrios. There you go, that's God's providence. And so we're also continuing our Christmas toy drive as well through the church. So if you've got any toys to bring for the less fortunate kids, that will be delivering in the lead up to Christmas. That's still going until the end of the month or until early December. So feel free to bring toys, brand new toys, for us to deliver to the kids. And also, just before we wrap up, on behalf of Koi, we just want to thank Anastasia for coming.
Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
So we'll just stand up and in prayer.
Glory to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, both now and ever, to the ages of ages. Amen. Christ our God, bless the food and drink of your servants, for you are the most holy one, now and ever, and to the ages of ages. Amen. Thank you once again. God bless.